6-year-old Luich Teutsch lived in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, in 1971 with her parents and her 8-year-old brother Michael. On the evening of May 14, 1971, Luich and Michael were playing outside their Jwad Road home. A man approached them just before 9 p.m. He offered Luich $8 to take a walk with him down the street, which she accepted. The man also offered Michael money to go ride his bike to distract him while he walked away hand in hand with Luich. Michael alerted his mother when the man and Luich did not return, and the police were called. 4 hours later, Luich's body was found less than a mile from her house in the backyard of a Hickory Avenue home. It was around 1 a.m. when an officer scanning yards with a flashlight found her body. The perpetrator left her body close to a gate leading to the back alley. Police found 2 of Luich's teeth along with an adult tooth next to her body. She had been severely and violently beaten. The adult tooth and other evidentiary items were collected by investigators so that they could be used later on. Witnesses came forward, saying they saw a strange man hanging out at a restaurant across the street from the Teutsch house, but he was never located. The case attracted national attention, and hundreds of tips came in from across Canada and the U.S. At one point, there were more than 500 persons of interest in the case. In the 1990s, investigators were able to extract DNA from items found at the crime scene. In 2015, investigators announced that they were able to create a DNA profile of the perpetrator. Investigators sought the services of Parabon Nanolabs, a DNA technology company in Virginia that specializes in DNA phenotyping, the process of predicting physical appearance and ancestry from unidentified DNA evidence. Law enforcement agencies use the company's Snapshot DNA phenotyping service for narrowing suspect lists and generating leads in criminal investigations. Parabon came up with 2 different images. One showed what the suspect looked like at 25 years old when the crime was committed, and the other image showed what the suspect may look like now at approximately 70 years old. In December 2019, Windsor Police Staff Sergeant Scott Chapman announced that Luich Teutsch's case was finally solved. Chapman said that Luich's case was one of the very first Canadian cases that used the technique of genetic genealogy. On ancestry research websites such as GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, users have the option to not share their genetic information with law enforcement. Chapman said police were ultimately able to identify the perpetrator through the DNA of a distant cousin found in a database. Parabon Nanolabs assisted with the identification. Windsor police made the decision at the time not to reveal the unknown man's name. They only said that he recently passed away and settled out west after committing the crime. While police were applauded for finally solving the crime, the refusal to release the man's name was met with some public criticism. Finally, in 2023, Windsor police changed their stance, and it was announced that Frank Arthur Hall was the man responsible. He was 22 years old back in 1971, and Hall lived less than 2 miles from the Teutsch family. He was never a suspect or a person of interest until the DNA match confirmed his guilt. Paul passed away in February 2019 in Edmonton, Canada, just a few months before the DNA match. Windsor Police Staff Sergeant Scott Chapman was the one who announced that Hall was the one responsible. He explained that in 2019, when he announced the case was solved, it was unclear whether they could legally name Hall, since there was such little precedent. That was part of the reason Hall's name was withheld at that time, said Chapman, acknowledging the landscape has since changed as genetic genealogy has become more mainstream. Prior to the release of that information, Chapman flew to Edmonton to tell Hall's family members. They were shocked but showed strength, he said. "We have to keep in mind, whatever Frank Hall did in his life is not a reflection on these people," Chapman said. "They've been victimized by this information too." According to Chapman, police records are unclear as to whether Hall's home was canvassed as part of the initial investigation back in 1971. Hall was, however, known to police in Windsor and in other places, mostly for property crimes like theft, though his name was not known to the public. Other law enforcement agencies have been made aware of Hall since 2019. Now that Hall's name is out there, Chapman believes it could lead to more tips from the public regarding other cases. It will give potentially new life to different investigations, he said. It is entirely possible. On January 3, 1979, in Snohomish County, Washington, a duck hunter embarked on a chilly morning expedition, hoping for a successful day of game hunting. His anticipation was focused on capturing ducks and fish, but his plans took an unexpected turn when he stumbled upon something unusual caught in a fish net along the muddy flats by the shore. Intrigued, he approached the scene only to be met with a chilling discovery: human remains. The identity of the deceased individual remained a mystery, raising questions about what had transpired on that fateful day. Was it an unfortunate accident, or did a more sinister event occur? Snohomish County, a place characterized by its tight-knit community and picturesque landscapes, seemed an unlikely setting for such a perplexing enigma. Despite being the third most populous county in Washington state, it offered a tranquil, small-town lifestyle with a relatively low crime rate. The community thrived on a blend of comfort and stability, making it hard to believe that a decades-long mystery would unfold in this idyllic setting. The new year of 1979 arrived with exceptionally harsh weather conditions in Snohomish County. Freezing temperatures and record-breaking snowfall had enveloped the region, making it challenging for residents to venture outside. January 3rd marked a rare day when the temperature climbed above freezing, allowing the duck hunter to pursue his quest for waterfowl profit. He arrived at the Snohomish River Delta on North Spencer Island, determined to catch ample ducks. Little did he know that this day would lead to a grim discovery. As he scanned the area for ducks, his attention was drawn to a peculiar sight ensnared in a fishing line. Upon closer inspection, he realized he was looking at human remains. Alarmed, he immediately alerted the police, and their arrival at the scene near Everett, Washington, sent shivers down their spines. The duck hunter's description eerily matched the horrifying reality. The scene revealed a macabre tableau. Tangled in the fishing line were clothing items, a shoe, and a partially skeletonized human leg bone. As they explored further, they discovered a checkered shirt, a human skull, ribs, another shoe containing a foot, a leather wallet devoid of its contents, a sock, and a belt. Although these details might appear inconsequential, they held the potential to unlock the identity of the unknown individual. Despite the complexity of the case, there was no immediate suspicion of foul play. Piecing together the events leading to the discovery of these remains presented a daunting task for investigators. The person had been deceased for an extended period, making it challenging to find definitive answers. The remains were subjected to an autopsy in the hopes of gathering any available information. The coroner's findings confirmed that the deceased had been dead for several months, providing a starting point for the investigation. However, efforts to identify the individual through dental records and physical examination yielded no results. As a result, the case was classified as John Doe 79-1, with the cause of death marked as undetermined due to the scarcity of leads. After waiting for approximately 2.5 months, the unidentified man was laid to rest in a lavish grave at Cypress Memorial Park in Everett, Washington, a practice that differs from current procedures, where skeletal remains are retained until identified. The investigation did not conclude with the burial. Both the police and the community continued to search for leads to unveil the John Doe's identity. However, these efforts proved fruitless, and the case eventually went cold. Decades passed and the mystery remained unsolved until 2008, when Sheriff's Detective Jim Scharf and retired Superior Court Judge Ken Kausert revisited the old case files, which had collected dust for years. Despite facing numerous obstacles, they were determined to uncover the truth. The data from the original investigation proved to be sparse and insufficient. Detectives struggled to establish a connection between the description of the mystery man and any missing persons from that era. The lack of digitized records further hindered their progress. Nevertheless, they persisted in their efforts to piece together a profile of the deceased. By 2015, Approximately 36 years had elapsed since the man's discovery, and the investigation remained unresolved. To distinguish the case from numerous other John and Jane Doe cases, detectives gave it the nickname Spencer Eastland. In July 2015, they obtained permission from the Snohomish County Judge to exhume John Doe's body from Spencer Eastland. This marked a critical step in their quest for answers. Forensic odontologist Dr. Kyla Tanaka attempted to match the man's dental records with missing persons reports, but found no promising leads. The case was then uploaded to the NAMU's database of missing persons in August 2015, but again, no breakthroughs emerged. Detectives scrutinized the evidence collected in the past, including clothing, wallet, and belt, and concluded that the man likely wore second-hand clothes. They pleaded with the public to come forward with any information, even though immediate identification seemed unlikely. Their persistence paid off in late 2015, when they received a tip suggesting that the description of Spencer Allen John Doe matched that of a missing farmhand from Marysville. This promising lead prompted intense investigation. The man in question had run a fruit stand in Everett, was known for his persistent drinking, had a noticeable limp, and had disappeared in the late 1970s. Detectives pursued this lead diligently, hoping it would bring them closer to the truth. After a month of rigorous investigation, they received a disheartening revelation. They located a tombstone in Yuma, Arizona, for the same farmhand mentioned in the tip. He had passed away in 1981 while in the southwestern desert region, dispelling their hopes of identifying Spencer Allen John Doe through this lead. As detectives continued their relentless pursuit of answers, the medical examiner's office made significant discoveries regarding the deceased man's characteristics. In April 2016, Dr. Cathy Taylor, a forensic anthropologist, examined his exhumed bones. She estimated his age to be between 27 and 61 years old, with a height ranging from 5 feet 1 inch to 5 feet 7 inches. Furthermore, she determined that he had a Native American, Caucasian, or mixed heritage. The investigation delved deeper into the man's medical history, uncovering a gruesome injury. His left femur had been severely shattered and left untreated, causing him to walk with a painful limp. He may have also suffered from temporal mandibular joint syndrome, a painful jaw condition. Despite these apparent medical issues, there was no record of him seeking medical attention, even for his leg injury. The investigation further revealed that he had lost 2 left anterior top teeth and 2 molars, with healed sockets indicating they were lost before his death. He had alloy fillings in 3 teeth, suggesting access to dental care. The detectives were left with numerous unanswered questions regarding the man's life and the reasons behind his neglect of medical care in later years. The possibility that he may have been an inmate crossed their minds, but it seemed unlikely, as his distinctive features would have made him memorable to those who encountered him. The case relied heavily on theories and speculations, with detectives aware that even the smallest details could hold the key to unraveling the mystery. In 2018, a portion of the man's femur was sent to Othram Labs, a private forensic genealogy company funded by DNAsolves.com. This initiative aimed to use advanced DNA testing to identify the man. Eventually, a match was found through the GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA databases, leading to the identification of the John Doe as Gary Lee Haney on February 10, 2023. Gary's life had been marked by turmoil and hardship. Born in 1950 as Gary Joseph Condamiti, he faced early challenges with his parents' divorce and adoption by his mother's new husband, Sheldon Lee Haney. The family traveled extensively due to Sheldon's military service and work with Boeing. Despite his passion for music and interests, Gary was believed to have had a mental disorder, possibly autism or schizophrenia, which led to his isolation from the extended family. In the later years of his life, Gary disappeared from his family's radar, and he was declared legally dead in 1976, 3 years before his remains were discovered on Spencer Island. Sheldon Haney's failure to report his son missing raised suspicions about his involvement in Gary's disappearance. The revelation of Gary's identity stirred hope that someone might hold the missing puzzle piece to his mysterious disappearance and death. The investigation uncovered a web of secrets and lies, leaving detectives with more questions than answers. Gary Lee Haney's life remained shrouded in mystery, both before and after his tragic demise. As the news of Gary's identity spread, there was a growing sense of hope that someone out there might have the missing piece of the puzzle, that crucial bit of information that could shed light on his mysterious disappearance and tragic death. In the picturesque town nestled among the stunning mountains of Preston County, West Virginia, with a population of approximately 1,500 residents, Terra Alta stands as a testament to natural beauty and a rich historical legacy. The town's charm and welcoming community spirit have long been celebrated by its inhabitants. However, it was within this idyllic setting that a tragic incident unfolded on August 22, 1972, claiming the life of a 13-year-old boy named Jeremiah Matthew Watkins. Jeremiah, lovingly known as Jerry to his parents, James Edward Watkins and Enid Nicola, was born in a Morgantown home in Monongalia County, West Virginia. Unfortunately, his family's dreams of a happy and complete life were shattered when James passed away in 1976, just 4 years after Jeremiah's birth. Despite this profound loss, Enid displayed remarkable resilience and dedicated herself entirely to raising her son, hoping for a fresh start in life. Overcoming numerous obstacles, Enid made the decision to move to Terra Alta, determined to provide Jeremiah with the best possible life. Jeremiah, for his part, was content with life's simple pleasures. As he grew, his adventurous spirit became increasingly evident, as he could often be seen riding his bicycle through the hills of Terra Alta while singing along to the tunes of old-time rock and roll. It remains uncertain whether Enid ever remarried, but in the mid-1980s, she welcomed a daughter named Jamie Jeremiah into their lives. Jeremiah cherished his baby sister immensely and cherished every moment spent with her. He would play with her for hours, bringing laughter to her little world. Despite his gentle and patient nature with his younger sibling, Jeremiah eagerly awaited the day when Jamie would take her first steps, sharing candy and tender moments with her. The last time Jeremiah laid eyes on his beloved sister was in 1985, when he was 13 years old, and Jamie was approximately a year old. While the exact date is unclear, it was in early November of that year when Jeremiah left home to explore the town, but tragically never returned. When Enid could not locate her son anywhere in Terra Alta, she reported him missing. This marked the beginning of a distressing period, not just for Jeremiah's family, but for the entire state of West Virginia, as it coincided with a devastating flood that swept through the region. The flood, one of the deadliest natural disasters in West Virginia's history, claimed 47 lives, injured countless others, and caused extensive property damage totaling an estimated $580 million. Amid the chaos and destruction, the search for Jeremiah was severely hampered by the floodwaters. Despite the relentless efforts of law enforcement, the 13-year-old boy remained missing, and Enid clung to hope for his safe return. However, that hope was shattered on November 2, 1985, when officers stumbled upon a shallow grave along the railroad tracks in Terra Alta. Upon closer examination, they made a gruesome discovery. Jeremiah's lifeless body lay in the shallow grave. Initially, it appeared as though he had fallen victim to the devastating flood. However, a closer inspection revealed a stab wound on Jeremiah's body, suggesting a more sinister and violent end. The investigation swiftly transitioned into a homicide inquiry as law enforcement scoured the area for clues. Unfortunately, luck did not favor the investigators, as the flood had washed away potential evidence, leaving them with more questions than answers. An autopsy revealed that Jeremiah had suffered a brain bleed from blunt force trauma to his head, but the fatal blow had come from the stab wound in his back. The loss of Jeremiah devastated his family, who grieved in silence while hoping for justice to be served. The Terra Alta detectives worked tirelessly, interviewing numerous individuals and pursuing every lead, but their efforts yielded no suspects or arrests. As time passed, the case grew cold, and Enid, frustrated by the lack of progress, attempted to move forward with her life as Jamie grew older. Nevertheless, the questions surrounding her brother's death continued to haunt her. In the early 2000s, while attending college, Jamie made the courageous decision to reach out to authorities in an attempt to uncover the truth about her brother's murder. Regrettably, her efforts were met with discouragement as many believed that finding the culprit after so many years was unlikely. In February 2023, Captain Tian Ticknell of the Preston County Sheriff's Office took it upon himself to revisit the decades-old unsolved murder case of Jeremiah. He delved deep into the case, meticulously reviewing old files, interviews, and witness statements. During this thorough examination, Captain Ticknell stumbled upon an interview with a young man named David Monroe Adams. Adams, who was only 18 years old at the time of Jeremiah's murder and a resident of Terra Alta, had provided a statement with inconsistencies, prompting further investigation. Authorities have not disclosed the specific inconsistencies that caught Captain Ticknell's attention, but they soon located David Adams, who was living in Westover, West Virginia. After several interviews, Adams initially denied any involvement in Jeremiah's death. However, during one of these interviews, he finally confessed to the murder. Adams revealed that on that fateful day in November 1985, he had engaged in a heated argument with Jeremiah over a stolen bicycle. This disagreement had escalated into a violent confrontation, with Adams striking Jeremiah in the face in a fit of rage. Unable to decide how to proceed, Adams dragged the injured boy to a nearby shed, where he ultimately fatally stabbed him. Afterward, he disposed of Jeremiah's lifeless body in a shallow grave near the train tracks. This confession marked a significant breakthrough in the case and provided a semblance of closure to Jeremiah's family, who had waited for justice for nearly 4 decades. David Adams, now 56 years old, was promptly taken into custody and charged with second-degree murder in connection to Jeremiah Watkins's death. He is currently being held on a $1 million bond in North Central. Upon hearing the news, Enid and Jamie were overwhelmed with a range of emotions. Although questions surrounding the murder still linger, they found solace in the fact that the perpetrator had finally been apprehended and could no longer pose a threat to anyone else. It was a bittersweet moment, one that allowed them to begin healing after years of uncertainty and anguish. On March 17, 2005, a hiker walking the Lone Mountain Trail in Carson City noticed a shoe sticking out of the ground and alerted authorities, who found the buried body of a woman wrapped in a sleeping bag. Authorities estimated that the woman had passed away about a year before she was discovered. Investigators followed the usual procedure to identify the woman, but were unable to, and she became a Jane Doe. Of the Carson City Sheriff's Office brought the case to the DNA Do Project in 2019 to attempt to investigate genetic genealogy, to trace Jane Doe's identity using DNA matches to build her family tree after a complex series of laboratory processes to extract DNA and translate it into a workable profile for a comparison to the millions of records in the databases. Volunteer investigative genetic genealogists get to work in May 2020. The DNA Do Project said that since research began, more than 13 volunteers have worked to connect the matches with family trees going back to ancestors born in the mid-1700s in England. It took a little less than a year to narrow a search of a single family. In the vast tree, 3 of the 6 siblings were women, and this lead was offered to the investigating officers to follow up. In October 2022, a family member's ancestry DNA test was uploaded to gedmatch.com, a public database that can be used in law enforcement cases. After this DNA match, investigators confirmed that Jane Doe is Joyce Rogers Annis, originally from Michigan. In addition to providing the critical lead to this identification, the DNA Do Project team also provided information about a man associated with Joyce who later confessed to burying her body on Lone Mountain. It turned out that 72-year-old Joyce passed away due to natural causes, and her husband Edward Barton buried her in the mountains. They were homeless and had no money for a funeral. Unfortunately, there is no way to prove or disprove Edward Barton's version of events, and the case is currently considered solved. Catherine Spacito attended high school in Brooklyn, New York during the 80s, before moving to Prescott, Arizona, to enroll at Prescott College as an art major and avid hiker. On June 12, 1987, she moved into her new residence, where she quickly made many new friends. Cathy informed her friends during dinner on June 12 of her plans to go hiking early the following morning, June 13 at 7:00 a.m. Cathy rode her mountain bike directly to the trailhead and started uphill from there. Trail is located within Prescott National Forest, approximately 10 minutes from downtown Prescott, and has long been popular with hikers in the area. Soon after Cathy left, other hikers heard someone calling out for assistance. Unfortunately, due to dense terrain, it took some time before anyone located her, by which point she had died. At first, it appeared as though this grisly scene could only belong to police Cathy, who were hiking through Yavapai County, when their thumb trail became insecure, and Cathy died as a result of blunt force injury to her left side, caused by 2 rocks and ratchet wrench discovered at the crime scene. Subsequent investigation determined her cause of death to be blunt force injury from 2 rocks striking together, as well as being struck in her eye using .22 caliber instrument that failed to enter her brain and struck an instrument with .22 caliber bullet that hit her eye with .22 caliber instrument, after which an instrument hit her eye using .22 caliber instrument, struck through her eye using .22 caliber instrument, which hit her face using .22 caliber instrument, which never managed to enter her brain before going on attack again and making cut marks visible at back of her head area. Therefore, police began their investigations on scene. Searching for perpetrators proved extremely challenging due to a lack of witnesses in certain cases, proving extremely challenging in terms of investigations. Over time, investigators determined there may have been multiple perpetrators. Yavapai County Sheriff David Rad advised everyone involved to keep all doors open. My team may be closer than ever before to discovering answers. If the case is solved, chances are DNA played a significant role. With recent developments of DNA tests such as family tree DNA tests available today, new breakthroughs could potentially solve it all. Yavapai's silent witness provided the reward, offering anonymous tips in order to solve cases more effectively. Sal Bazito flew in from New York to visit the crime scene, along with detectives. Sal asked anyone with information to contact him immediately. One classmate from high school sent an email out. "I hope you'll forgive my posting this grim information here, but I'm sharing it in hopes that prayer and closure for one of our own may find peace now. Cathy Spacito was brutally murdered in 1987. The case remains open." Cathy had recently visited Prescott with her partner when it happened, and they visited some downtown stores together. On one visit, they saw an enormous window display featuring Cathy's picture. Despite this fact that police continue searching for those responsible, Cathy and her partner spoke with the store owner, who offered new possibilities that may help their search efforts. Recently, new evidence has surfaced which has renewed hope of solving this mystery. An alumni also noticed posters with similar slogans in local stores across the city. She was delighted to discover that memory of Cathy and her pursuit of justice were not lost to time. "I thought you might find this information interesting, and please remember her spirit along with this investigation during 2021. Sheriff Rad commented on how 34 years can seem like an eternity. Yet our department as well as cold case investigators still recall each investigation by name. What happened to Cathy? Our legal team is currently investigating. We have information regarding what transpired to Cathy, so we hope they take the necessary steps and speak up. Especially since Cathy's brother advised her in an interview conducted in 2021 that one should never give up hope of having an optimistic future. He vividly remembered the day when he received such a shocking and painful news. It was shocking and unbearable, something no one should experience. Unfortunately, this wasn't an accident either. Someone with extreme anger was looking to end her existence as soon as possible. Sal Bazito revealed their father died suddenly without explanation in 2010, and their mother passed away a couple of years later, leading him to speculate that it could have been due to heartbreak over events happening with Cathy. Sal concluded the interview stating he believes his mother passed due to broken hearts due to what had transpired with Cathy. Cathy Spacco died a horrid death on August 25, 2023, and Sheriff David Rhodes revealed at a press gathering that DNA evidence indicated Brian Scott Bennett as the suspect in her case. Sheriff Rhodes stated to reporters, "I can state today with absolute certainty that Brian Scott Bennett killed Cathy Spacco. She was one of his serial predators." Bennett would have turned 53 by the time of his death in 1994, having just recently relocated from Calvin, Kentucky to Prescott for only 16 months before leaving Prescott High School in 1988 and entering temporary service with the Army before eventually leaving that branch and joining in 1989 when it reformed itself temporarily again. Bennett was eventually charged with forgery in 1991 and sentenced to 3 years of probation by Prescott Sheriff's Office, despite never having been found guilty of violent offenses. Additionally, he was imprisoned at Arizona prison due to document forgery charges as well as wanted status during 1993. Investigators believe Cathy was Bennett's initial victim. Additionally, investigators believe he was also responsible for an assault against another female victim aged 30 at approximately the same location on April 13, 1990. Her boyfriend was camping alongside her when Bennett came from behind and threatened her by throwing a boulder over her head, then attacked before fleeing back into the woods. Sheriff R.H. subsequently provided details at a press conference regarding an additional incident along the same trail, wherein DNA tests from this incident led investigators to a relative of Bennett. In 2017, using advanced DNA technology, investigators were able to connect DNA evidence found from the second incident with Cathy's story as told by Sheriff R.H.'s. Their DNA samples were sent off for testing at laboratories where female descendant Bennett could be found. After performing a tree analysis of family members, authorities traveled to Kentucky and then Bennett in order to ascertain if there was indeed someone related. Bennett's body was then cremated so they could obtain her complete DNA profile for analysis purposes. Investigators confirmed that both attacks along the hiking trail had the same DNA profile. Family forensics analysis continued. DNA was extracted through cheek swabs taken from Bennett's brother and sister of Bennett. Investigators were not able to locate the DNA from a wrench that ended Cathy's life until March 2023, according to Bennett's testimony, when they identified its DNA on a wrench used in killing Cathy. Bennett stated that a male suspect assaulted 2 female attendees of an event held in Chino Valley during July 1990 before assaulting one more who lay drinking before collapsing in bed for the night. Bennett followed Renee Sandel into her room, attempted to attack her, and attempted to open fire before witnesses were able to break down the door and force Bennett out before fleeing again. Later detained by Chino Valley Police Department, but cleared due to conflicting witness testimony. Sheriff Rhodes identified Renee Sandel as Bennett's 4th victim from that incident on June 6, 1993, as she left her post. Prescott Bennett Police Office at Prescott Bennett forced Renee Sandel into her vehicle at knife point and assaulted her repeatedly before stopping it because the headlights weren't dimming properly, prompting Renee Sandel to flee, with RAD reporting that Renee believed her life may be threatened by this individual. Renee Sandel was 22 when she was kidnapped and assaulted. At Friday's press conference, she spoke of what happened during that ordeal as part of Renee Bennett's testimony. Unfortunately, he was released again, based on differing stories and insufficient evidence. Renee Sandel spoke at this press conference, as Renee Bennett wasn't charged due to inconsistencies between their accounts, as well as lack of evidence against him. When she said that it took an extended wait, my response was immediate. Thank God. I gave him all praise and glory because he was with me during prayer time that evening. His Lordship spoke directly with me as well, and is ultimately responsible for why I'm here today. Today, she is at peace. Cathy. You are liberated. There are too many feelings I cannot describe to you in words alone. It is impossible for me to enumerate them all. Devil believes it's essential for young people, both younger and older alike, to keep an eye on themselves as well as be conscious of those in their surroundings. Be alert for anything suspicious. My grandchildren often hear me remind them about this fact as well, since Mom's cold case detectives were able to link 4 distinct victim cases involving Cathy Renee Sandel and 2 others through DNA analysis, even though Bennett is not being prosecuted in these matters. Rad pointed out at a briefing for the press how such an act could occur in such a lovely location, raising doubts as to their significance and gravity. Authorities were inquisitive as to whether there might be additional victims beyond Cathy and 3 women linked with suspect. Investigators believe there may be multiple victims. The suspect continued to stress the serious nature of violent crimes. These predators noted it's highly likely, considering how frequently their actions occurred, that there aren't 4 instances existing of him being involved with these actions. Sheriff RHs noted that we accomplished our second purpose with this case by giving voice and answers back to survivors, as well as providing information back into the community. Volunteer detectives and their many colleagues spent much time and energy solving 4 cases today, providing relief, closure, or perhaps even validation to 4 women involved in those cases. Prescott Mayor Phil Good, who attended the press conference, expressed that recent advancements in DNA technology provide closure for those involved with cold cases, like Cathy Spacito. There is now more information than ever available that may help bring justice into people's homes. 16-year-old Kimberly Liesel lived in Livingston County, Michigan in 1982. She loved poetry and spending time with her sisters. On March 20, 1982, Kimberly left her boyfriend's home and called her mom from a gas station payphone to tell her she was on her way home. She decided to hitchhike, something she had done before. She started in the area of 8 Mile and Inner Roads, and she got a ride to the area of 8 Mile and Merriman Roads in Livonia. At around 6:30 p.m., she made at least 4 phone calls trying to find a ride the rest of the way home. Sadly, Kimberly never made it back home, and she was not seen alive again. Her family searched for her, tracked down her friends, but could not find any trace of her. She was reported missing to the Green Oak Township Police Department the next day. Kimberly Liesel's mother said police kept asking her about her daughter being a runaway, but she was not a runaway. She was on her way home. Joanna Liesel said the days turned into weeks, and then her body was found on April 14, 1982. Kimberly Liesel's body was found behind a park and ride in the Island Lake Recreation Area near Grand River Avenue and Kensington Road, just 5 miles from her home. She had been assaulted, beaten, and strangled, and her personal belongings were not located. An autopsy revealed that even though she had been missing for more than 3 weeks, she lost her life 4 or 5 days before being found. Investigators with the Green Oak Township Police Department exhausted all leads before the case went cold. Kimberly's sister, Cindy Authors, dedicated herself to helping track down the perpetrator. About 15 years ago, I had just started Googling her name to see if I could find anything on her, and I found 2 really old articles that did not have the right information. Cindy Author said, "That kind of upset me that I could not find any information on it. It was like she just did not exist, so that was where I started because I wanted to correct the wrong information, and then it just went from there." Cindy Author started a Facebook page to share information about the case, posted flyers, and tracked down her sister's friends. She became a pseudo-detective. Kimberly's case got a new set of eyes recently when Michigan State University students, taking part in a cold case internship with Michigan State Police, took interest. The students sifted through boxes of evidence and files, and there was a name that caught their eye: Charles David Shaw. Back in 1983, someone had tipped police that Shaw had lived in the area where Kimberly Liesel lived, and they said he had recently destroyed his apartment, which they thought was suspicious. Police took note but never tracked Shaw down. That was interesting because in early 2023, Livingston County cold case investigators announced Shaw as the suspect in the 1983 slaying of 19-year-old Christina Caston. Christina lived with her mother and father in Redford Township at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen between 7:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. on March 19, 1983, walking westbound on 5 Mile Road near Lola Park in Redford Township. Her mother reported her missing on March 21, 1983, and her body was found on March 29, 1983, in the Oak Grove State Game Area on Forest Road in Deerfield Township. Police were able to obtain DNA from Christina's body in March 2022. Investigators applied and received grant funding through Season of Justice, a non-profit organization dedicated to funding DNA testing on unsolved cold cases. In May 2022, the DNA evidence was sent to AAM Lab in Texas, the company behind DNA Solves. AAM used the genealogical profile to identify leads in the case and turn that evidence over to investigators. Investigators said through that work and cooperation from the suspect's family, they were able to identify beyond a reasonable doubt who the perpetrator was. The cooperation of the Shaw family during the investigation was paramount to identifying Charles Shaw as the person responsible for what had happened to Christina Caston. Livingston County investigators said in a press release that investigators then began focusing on Shaw as a suspect in Kimberly Liesel's case. They created maps of areas where he was known to spend time, like where he lived and where he worked, and they discovered that those locations surrounded Kimberly's location. Investigators did a property audit on all the property and all the evidence that they had in the case. The students and detectives took that evidence to the Michigan State Police Crime Lab and asked for it to be retested. They were hoping for a miracle, and then, 4 months later, they got a hit. DNA was found on one of the items that had been collected from the crime scene. The DNA had been among the evidence for 40 years and had gone unnoticed. The cell was uploaded into the system and linked to Shaw. The announcement came in September 2023, and investigators believe Shaw kidnapped Kimberly while she was walking. Police said they are 100% confident that Charles David Shaw is responsible for taking the life of Kimberly Liesel. Shaw's body was found in Detroit on November 27, 1983, and the medical examiner's report listed the cause as accidental asphyxiation. Unfortunately, there will never really be justice. Shaw had several interactions with law enforcement beginning at a young age. One such interaction resulted in his arrest in 1981 for the attempted abduction of a woman in the Phil McDonald's parking lot. Detectives are exploring the possibility that Shaw is responsible for additional crimes during the early 1970s, until his end in November 1983. Human remains were unintentionally found in a sealed well close to an abandoned warehouse in Opino, south of Vigo, and close to the Portuguese border in February 2021 by a worker. The remains had undergone a process known as decomposition and had become severely. The unidentified man's identity remained a mystery, despite investigators being able to establish that he had suffered a fatal blow to the head and other severe impacts to his body. This was because of a process known as saponification, in which bacteria that thrive in a warm, wet environment turn a body into a wacky, soapy substance that is completely unrecognizable. The DNA test results revealed no matches to any known or missing person in police databases. When the investigation came to a standstill in 2022, the Guardia Civil Police Force turned to Fernando Kula, a forensic scientist from the Institute of Legal Medicine in Galicia. Forensic facial reconstruction involves using a combination of anatomy, anthropology, and artistic interpretation to reconstruct a face from skeletal remains with the help of artist Alba Sanin. Dr. Kula produced 6 distinct images of the man's face, each with a slight variation in the man's facial hair color and amount. The photo is fashionable. Developed perceptions. A few weeks later, a Portuguese woman came forward and said she recognized her brother, even though she hadn't seen him in over 3 years. After the woman's account was verified by DNA testing, the man who had been missing for 20 years was found to be Carlos Alberto Vieira de Ouro, a Portuguese native who had been operating a used car company in Vigo for 20 years. The 37-year-old Carlos's disappearance was traced back to October 13, 2018, by Guardia Civil investigators who followed his movements until his death. 5 suspects have been identified by the investigators, all of whom are thought to have varying degrees of involvement in a slaying that may be connected to scams Carlos committed when dealing with used cars. The investigating judge in Opino has remanded 2 of the accused men in custody and released on bail the 3rd man who was allegedly involved. Dr. Kula has gained recognition for his ability to identify bodies and advanced stages of decomposition. He has worked at Darwin Cemetery in Falkland, where the International Committee of the Red Cross has spearheaded an initiative to provide names to over 120 soldiers from Argentina who are currently unknown. Additionally, he helped identify the victims of the 2004 Madrid Train B bombing. He also gave a face to Manuel Blanco Romasanta, the first known serial killer in Spanish history, who murdered 13 people in the 1800s, claimed a curse had turned him into a wolf. There has been no public update regarding the men who are suspected of killing Carlos Alberto Vieira de Oro. Lake Worth is a coastal city located in Palm Beach County, Florida, and it boasts a population of approximately 38,000 residents. The city is well known for its vibrant downtown area, which is home to a variety of shops, restaurants, and art galleries. Additionally, Lake Worth features numerous parks and recreational spaces, making it an appealing destination for both residents and visitors alike. The city has a rich history, characterized by its Mediterranean revival architecture, but it's also the site of a tragic event, the brutal murder of a woman in 1985. To fully understand the backdrop of this crime, we need to rewind the clock to February 28, 1907, in Wilma, Arkansas. This was the day that marked the birth of a precious child named Mildred Warren. Mildred's arrival brought immense joy and hope to her family. She was the second of Jesse Warren and Margaret Warren's 6 children. From a young age, Mildred exhibited a heart full of love and a curious mind that thirsted for adventure. However, fate had different plans in store for her family. In 1915, tragedy struck when Mildred was just 8 years old. Her father, Jesse Warren, suffered a fatal heart attack at the tender age of 37, leaving behind a grieving wife and 6 young children. Margaret, Mildred's mother, stood tall and resolute, determined to raise her children single-handedly. As the years passed, Mildred grew into a strong and independent woman with a heart of gold. Her innate desire to help others led her to pursue a career in psychiatric nursing in 1931, dedicating over 4 decades of her life to serving those in need. Along her life's journey, fate smiled upon her once more in 1940. At the age of 40, she met and fell in love with Mildred Metheny, a professor. Their bond was beautiful, and they exchanged vows in 1942. 3 years later, they were blessed with a son, Gary Metheny, in 1945. Gary eventually got married and had 2 children of his own, bringing immense joy and love into Mildred's life as she embraced the role of a doting grandmother. However, life had more challenges in store for Mildred. Tragedy struck again when her beloved husband passed away in 1958, leaving her widowed at the age of 51. Despite the heartbreak, Mildred refused to be defeated by grief and found a new purpose in life by caring for her beloved brother, whose mental health began to deteriorate. With her nursing background, Mildred was well equipped to handle the challenges that came with caring for her brother, and she did so with grace and compassion. As the years went by, Mildred's health started to decline, and her memories began to fade away. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and dementia, which made it increasingly difficult for her to manage even the simplest of daily tasks. Nonetheless, her determination remained relentless, and she found herself needing more and more assistance with everyday activities. While it was heartbreaking for her family to witness her struggle, they were committed to providing her with the care and support she needed. Ultimately, it became evident that Mildred could no longer live independently and had to rely on others for help. The decision was made to relocate Mildred from her home in Arkansas to live with her sister Gladis in Lake Worth, Florida. This transition was not without its challenges, as Mildred's condition made it difficult for her to adapt to her new surroundings. Her mind often felt like a confusing maze, causing her to reminisce about visiting her long-departed parents at their childhood home, oblivious to the reality that they were no longer alive. Mildred's confusion grew worse with time, and she required constant supervision to prevent her from wandering off. Despite the best efforts of her family, it was impossible to keep a watchful eye on her 24/7. Tragedy struck on April 27, 1985, when a family misunderstanding resulted in Mildred Metheny venturing out alone in the afternoon. Her sister Gladis had last seen her around 3 p.m. that day, but less than an hour later, she reported Mildred as missing to the authorities in Lake Worth. The family's worst fears were confirmed when, 7 hours later, at approximately 10 p.m., Mildred was discovered naked and unresponsive by passers-by on the desolate old Indian Town Road in Jupiter, Florida. The passerby immediately alerted the authorities, leading to the arrival of investigators from the Lake Worth, Florida Police Department at the scene. The sight that greeted them was gruesome and horrifying. A frail, naked figure lay motionless on the ground, surrounded by pieces of discarded clothing, with signs of a violent attack apparent. Blood and broken dentures were scattered near her battered body, and her head and face bore severe injuries. Mildred was barely conscious, and she was quickly rushed to Martin Memorial Hospital in Stuart, in critical condition. The assault on Mildred was beyond comprehension, and her injuries were so severe that even the hospital staff struggled to conduct tests due to her unresponsive state. Despite their best efforts, Mildred Metheny succumbed to her injuries 11 days later, on May 8, 1985, at the age of 78. On that fateful day, at 12 p.m., the medical examiner's report confirmed that she had been assaulted, and her cause of death was attributed to a homicide caused by cardiac arrhythmia, a skull fracture, internal bleeding, and other injuries sustained during the brutal attack. While examining her body, examiners managed to obtain a genetic profile from swabs collected from her, revealing a mix of Mildred's and her assailant's DNA. However, the technology required for analyzing such DNA samples was not available at the time, so the genetic material was preserved, awaiting future advancements that could bring closure to the case. The case of Mildred Metheny's brutal murder quickly gained widespread attention. News of the heinous crime spread like wildfire, capturing the interest of news channels, publications, and the public across the state of Florida. Conversations about the case echoed in coffee shops, on the streets, and in homes. Investigators launched a thorough canvassing of the neighborhood, hoping to gather any information that might lead them to the perpetrator. It was during this intense investigation that a young couple stepped forward with crucial information in May 1985. The couple consisted of 21-year-old Ty Martin and 28-year-old Robert Steffi. They bravely recounted their encounter with Mildred at a busy intersection near a Burger King restaurant. Despite her frail appearance, Mildred stood out in her pink trousers and vibrant orange blouse. Concerned for her well-being, the couple engaged her in conversation for about 15 minutes. Suddenly, a 1967 brown Oldsmobile, two-door Delta 88 Holiday Coupe pulled up beside them, and a man with blonde hair and a missing front tooth claimed to be a neighbor, offering Mildred a ride home. Without hesitation, Mildred entered the car and left with the stranger. However, despite the young couple's report, investigators faced a frustrating roadblock in their quest for justice. They were unable to locate the car or identify the stranger who had offered Mildred a ride that day. Frustrated by the lack of progress, they turned to the media for assistance. In June 1985, a Crime Stoppers reconstruction was filmed in an effort to jog people's memories and potentially uncover new leads. However, even this effort did not yield a breakthrough. For the next 35 years, the case remained cold, and Mildred's killer remained at large. Loved ones were left to wonder if justice would ever be served. Finally, in March of 2021, a breakthrough occurred, thanks to the relentless and dedicated work of the Cold Case Homicide Unit. They utilized the latest advancements in DNA processing technology to re-examine the case. The DNA samples from Mildred's case were submitted to the state's database, and a forensic scientist with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office took on the mission to uncover the truth. Despite the limitations posed by the previous analyses, which had depleted much of the swab's cotton tips, the forensic scientist refused to give up. Instead, she employed a clever solution by collecting DNA from the wooden bases of the swabs, utilizing cutting-edge software. Through this innovative approach, a partial genetic profile of the unknown DNA found on Mildred was created, using the Combined DNA Index System, CODIS, which holds a vast database of convicted offenders' DNA. This breakthrough provided a crucial lead in the search for the perpetrator. The buzz surrounding the long cold case was reinvigorated as news of the DNA match spread. The Florida State CODIS DNA database revealed a link between the DNA profile found in Mildred's case and the DNA of an offender identified as Richard Curtis Lange, a 62-year-old man born on April 13, 1960, in Florida. Lange had a troubling criminal history, with an aggravated assault conviction on his record by the age of 25. Shockingly, he had managed to avoid jail time on both occasions, receiving only probation. However, Lange's criminal activities did not stop there. Records showed that he was later convicted on weapons charges in both 2006 and 2012, spending some time behind bars. Lange's history of violence and brushes with the law raised questions about whether his unchecked behavior played a role in the heinous crime against Mildred. Confirmation of his involvement required further investigation and a direct DNA saliva sample from Lange himself. To obtain this final confirmation, the sheriff's office secured a DNA confirmation search warrant against Lange. Detectives made their way to Lange's residence in Boynton Beach, Florida, which was approximately 10 minutes from where Mildred was allegedly kidnapped. They collected a sample of Lange's DNA, which ultimately confirmed the match to the DNA found on the victim. Despite Lange's vehement denials of involvement in Mildred's murder, the DNA evidence left no room for doubt. With the DNA confirmation in hand, the case that had remained cold for decades was finally heating up. The trial of Richard Lange began on April 5, 2021, in a West Palm Beach courtroom. The courtroom was filled with tension as all eyes were fixed on a small vial containing preserved genetic material, a tiny but powerful piece of evidence that had the potential to unravel the mystery that had shrouded Mildred Metheny's murder for decades. Prosecutors meticulously outlined their case, arguing that the DNA unequivocally belonged to Richard Lange. The defense attorney, on the other hand, remained stoic, his focus on the judge as the evidence mounted against his client. The scientific evidence presented by the forensic scientist and her team of experts was indisputable. DNA analysis demonstrated that the likelihood of the genetic sample belonging to anyone other than Lange was infinitesimal, with the odds being 27 quadrillion times more in favor of it being his DNA. Lange's defense attorney countered by claiming that such statistical evidence was misleading and insisted on his client's innocence. He suggested that the same likelihood could apply to Lange's close relatives, such as his father or brother. But without their DNA profiles in the CODIS database, this remained a mere possibility. To address this contention, Tiffany Roy, an experienced forensic analyst, suggested that Lange's defense attorney obtain DNA samples from Lange's close male relatives to demonstrate their genetic similarity and determine if they could be excluded as potential contributors to the DNA found on the sexual assault kit. Following Roy's advice, the defense attorney reached out to one of Lange's brothers, who consented to provide a DNA sample. The results confirmed what was expected: a 100% match with Lange's DNA. As the trial continued, the prosecution vehemently challenged the defense's theory, asserting that it was baseless speculation. They emphasized that there was no concrete evidence to support the defense's claim that Lange's relatives could have been in Florida in 1985. Records indicated that Lange had only moved to Boynton Beach from Massachusetts in his 20s and had no known connections to Florida before that. After 2 intense days of court proceedings, the final verdict was announced, and justice was served. Richard Lange was found guilty of first-degree murder and battery, finally bringing closure to a case that had remained unsolved for 38 long years. Despite sitting in a wheelchair during the trial, Lange remained calm and composed, occasionally nodding off during slower parts of the proceedings. His silence spoke volumes as bailiffs escorted him out of the courtroom on May 27, 2021, under the watchful eye of Circuit Judge Dahlia Weiss, who booked Lange into the Palm Beach County Jail without bail. Gary Metheny, now 88 years old, fondly remembers a woman who was not just his mother, but also his friend and confidant. He speaks of her with great admiration and respect, describing her as a woman of many talents, articulate, creative, and talented. He cherishes memories of her sewing 8th-grade shirts out of hog feed sacks, which, despite their humble origins, were just as good, if not better, than store-bought shirts. After decades, the book on his mother's case is finally closed, and Gary can find some solace knowing that justice has been served. Although justice cannot bring his mother back, he can at least find peace in the knowledge that her attacker has been held accountable for his heinous crime. The determination of investigators and advancements in DNA technology ultimately led to the resolution of this cold case, providing closure not only to Gary Metheny and his family, but also to the community of Lake Worth, Florida, and beyond. Mildred Metheny's memory lives on, and her story serves as a testament to the tireless pursuit of justice and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. In the serene Nakamixon Township, nestled within the rural confines of Bucks County, Pennsylvania, a tranquil community thrives, with approximately 3,000 residents calling it home. This picturesque area is renowned for its unwavering dedication to preserving natural beauty and promoting tourism. However, this peaceful setting was forever scarred by a heinous crime that unfolded in 1980, casting a long shadow over the region. On the ill-fated day of September 18, 1980, a construction worker toiled away on a cottage undergoing renovations. The cottage was nestled amidst the dense woods off Center Hill Road, approximately 1 mile south of its intersection with Kintner Hill Road in Nakamixon Township. In the midst of his labor, fate led him to stumble upon a gruesome sight, a lifeless body concealed beneath the wooden structure. This grim discovery shattered the tranquility of the forest, leaving the entire community in mourning and investigators grappling with an enigmatic puzzle. The lifeless body, upon its grim revelation, was conveyed to the morgue, where it underwent a thorough examination under the skilled hands of the medical examiner. The results were chilling. The man had sustained 4 fatal gunshot wounds to the head. The victim was subsequently identified as Richard Wesley Wheeler, his identity confirmed through a fingerprint match in the records. Armed with this critical information, investigators embarked on an arduous journey to uncover the layers of Wheeler's past, seeking to unearth the truth behind his tragic demise. As the investigation into Richard Wesley Wheeler's murder unraveled, a troubling revelation emerged. Wheeler had a criminal record. Having been released from prison just a year earlier in 1979, it appeared that he wasted no time reacquainting himself with trouble. He was soon linked to a perilous venture, an illicit methamphetamine lab jointly operated with 2 other men, Peter Eric Marshall and Leslie Schmidt. This lab was clandestinely housed in a camper parked near Lake Nakamixon, a risky endeavor fueled by determination. However, the enterprise took a sinister turn when Wheeler mysteriously vanished, and shortly thereafter, his lifeless body was discovered. Detectives understood that to solve this perplexing case, they needed to delve deeper into the workings of this illicit operation. It became evident that Wheeler was the mastermind, residing on the same property and closely overseeing the activities. The operation was further guarded by the formidable and loyal bodyguard, Peter Eric Marshall, while imprisoned financier Leslie Schmidt, though detained, kept a watchful eye on proceedings. Fate intervened when Richard Wheeler, a former convict, found himself incarcerated once more for a previous crime, theft of boats, which earned him the nickname the Captain. Schmidt, on the other hand, was serving a sentence in a different facility, but had entrusted Wheeler with a substantial sum of money for management. Their unlikely companionship flourished, leading them down a dark and perilous path. Upon delving further into Marshall's background, it was revealed that he had been imprisoned for stealing a 41-foot sailboat. Despite being ordered to leave the islands and deported back to Germany, Marshall's love for the sea remained unquenchable. He found work as a crewman on a private yacht, relishing the freedom and adventure of the ocean once more. However, in February 1977, while the yacht's owners were ashore enjoying an evening out, Marshall used his nautical skills to abscond with the 41-foot sailboat, along with a substantial amount of cash totaling $10,000. Marshall's audacious exploits continued when, just a month later, in March 1977, he targeted an even larger prize, a 43-foot sailboat docked in a harbor in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. Marshall's insatiable thirst for adventure and penchant for eluding authorities were evident. Nevertheless, his criminal journey eventually led him to a federal prison in Danbury, Connecticut, in May 1977, where he crossed paths with two notorious individuals, Wheeler and Schmidt. Bonding over their shared criminal histories, the trio hatched a plan to enter the illegal drug trade upon their release from prison. Wheeler was the first to regain his freedom in November 1979, marking a pivotal moment in their operation. Later that same year, Schmidt was granted a 30-day furlough from prison, a decision that would significantly impact the methamphetamine operation. Seizing this opportunity, Schmidt orchestrated a critical connection for Wheeler, leading to the lease of a property in the tranquil township of Nakamixon. The collaboration reached its apex when Schmidt generously provided Wheeler with a substantial sum of $250,000 intended to support Schmidt's family while he completed the remainder of his sentence. Wheeler understood the weight of this responsibility and the need to use the funds wisely. In July 1980, Peter Eric Marshall was released from prison, but his newfound freedom was short-lived. U.S. immigration officials from JFK Airport in New York City were escorting him to his homeland of Germany, a place he had not called home since his youth. Marshall knew that he had to act swiftly to avoid an undesirable fate. As he boarded the plane, he covertly scanned for an opportunity to escape, and then, as if Providence had intervened, the pilot announced a flight cancellation due to mechanical issues. Amidst the ensuing chaos, Marshall seized his chance and vanished into the bustling crowds of the airport. In 1983, armed with a wealth of information and a growing resolve, investigators embarked on a renewed quest to unravel the unsolved murder case. Witnesses were interviewed, and through their testimonies the fragments of the puzzle began to coalesce. It was revealed that the triggerman, of German descent, had been hired by none other than Leslie Schmidt himself. The shooter's identity traced back to his time in Danbury Federal Prison. As the intricate web of connections and relationships slowly unraveled, it became evident that a tapestry of deceit and greed had precipitated Wheeler's tragic demise. The investigation posed formidable challenges, but through unrelenting determination, Bucks County Detective David Hanks eventually untangled the mystery. In 2023, Peter Eric Marshall reappeared in Upper Bucks County, but his return was far from harmonious. Tensions simmered between Wheeler, Schmidt, and the two businessmen, hurtling them toward a violent collision. Schmidt had grown suspicious of Wheeler, convinced that he was swindling him out of his share of the methamphetamine profits. In a fit of rage, Schmidt ordered Marshall to eliminate Wheeler, whom he believed had betrayed him. Marshall, who had been fiercely loyal to Wheeler for years, found himself in a precarious situation. Ultimately, he reluctantly followed Schmidt's orders, fatally shooting Wheeler, and then hastily fled across state lines into New Jersey. The investigation laid bare a dark facet of human nature, where the insatiable craving for wealth and power could culminate in unimaginable acts of violence. The once enigmatic cold case, which had long cast a shadow of uncertainty, finally found resolution. The meticulous investigative work pieced together the missing elements, constructing a timeline of events that ultimately led to closure. The relentless pursuit of Marshall, who had vanished after the murder, resembled a relentless hunt for a phantom. However, investigators refused to yield, scouring every shred of evidence and pursuing every lead. In March 2023, a breakthrough emerged, a critical piece of information from Marshall's criminal history that would finally lead them to their elusive target. It was akin to finding a needle in a haystack when investigators unearthed that Marshall had been arrested in 1982 on drug conspiracy charges in New York. During that arrest, he had identified himself as Charles McLaren. Leveraging modern technology, investigators matched the fingerprints from McLaren's arrest to those taken in 1977. This discovery exposed how Marshall had managed to obscure his true identity, assuming a new persona as Charles McLaren. Under this new identity, Marshall crafted an entirely different life, complete with a wife, children, and even a thriving limousine service in the bustling metropolis. For over 2 decades, he remained hidden, with his criminal past a distant memory. After years of relentless pursuit and the painstaking assembly of the puzzle, the Bucks County District Attorney's Office finally brought closure to the case, although the culprits had already passed away, Marshall in 2006 and Schmidt in 2022. Justice had ultimately been served for the victim and his grieving family. While the legacy of the crime and the names of the individuals involved would forever be etched in history, the resolution of the case serves as a poignant reminder that law enforcement perseveres in their quest for truth and justice. With the case now closed, the Bucks County District Attorney's Office can move forward, knowing that they have fulfilled their duty to seek justice and bring closure to a dark chapter in their community's history. 17-year-old Gladis Ariano lived in Boyle Heights, Los Angeles, in 1996. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had big dreams for her life. Gladis was last seen on January 28, 1996, leaving her home. When she failed to return home later in the day, she was reported missing by her family. 2 days later, her body was found off a main road in a ravine in Topanga Canyon. She had been assaulted and strangled. Forensic evidence was collected from her body, and a DNA profile of the unknown offender was uploaded to state and federal DNA databases. However, a match could not be found. An extensive investigation was conducted by the investigators at the time, but it led nowhere, and the case went cold. That was until 2019 when Los Angeles police arrested a man by the name of Jose Luis Garcia for domestic assault. During the booking process, DNA swabs were taken from Garcia and processed. Investigators then realized that his DNA matched the DNA that was taken from Gladis's body in 1996. The crime took place when he was just 19 years old. They obtained a second DNA swab from him. The Los Angeles Crime Lab was then able to confirm that Garcia's genetic profile matched the unidentified sample taken from Gladis's body in 1996. 43-year-old Jose Luis Garcia was arrested by U.S. Marshals on September 29, 2019, in Dallas, Texas. He was extradited on October 14 to Los Angeles County, where he was held on a $1 million bail. Detective Hugo Rega said, "This case is typical of the type of cases that unsolved detectives are faced with on a daily basis. We are gratified that we were successful in bringing this tragic case to a close." Rega confirmed that investigators were looking into the possibility that Garcia was involved in other crimes as well. Gladis's niece and goddaughter Samantha Marino spoke movingly of the need to remember her godmother, as well as all other women who were victims of violence. "Recognizing her life is important. Beautiful Latina souls from Boyle Heights should never be forgotten," Moreno said. "Acts of violence against women should never be forgotten." Samantha Moreno thanked the detectives who never lost sight of finding justice. Gladys Ariano's case was worked on by retired detectives Joe Purcell and Sean McCarthy, who both work part-time on the Sheriff's Department's Unsolved Case Unit. "Thank you for not giving up on our Gladys, who was a loving daughter, sister, aunt, and godmother." Gladys was only 17 when her life was taken. She had a beautiful soul. She was beautiful, intelligent, gorgeous, and she had a radiant smile. "She had such big dreams for her life. My grandparents would have been so proud of her," Moreno said. She was grateful Garcia was off the streets after nearly a quarter century. "We want nothing more than for him to pay for his brutal crime," she said. "We recognize that this will not bring Gladys back, but we are relieved to know that there will be justice for Gladys. This is a victory that we acknowledge in her honor, and we look forward to more victories." Jose Luis Garcia was found guilty of all the charges against him on July 18, 2023. It was a day the loved ones of Gladys Ariano had been waiting decades for. "It is never enough for having taken the life of such a beautiful soul," said Elizabeth Ariano of her sister Gladys. Gladis, Ariano's sister and best friend, told the court that what Garcia did nearly destroyed them, as they wondered for more than 25 years what happened to her. "It was tough, but it felt really good to finally get it off your chest and actually see him and release it and have some kind of comfort," said Vanessa Ariano. Gladys Ariano's younger sister, Janet Ramirez, said the plea deal gives her some comfort, but it is not enough. 19 years is never enough, but I have comfort knowing now she can rest and that the perpetrator is going to be behind bars, because for 25 years, I've lived with the guilt of not knowing what I could have done differently, Ramirez said. Jose Garcia was sentenced on August 15, 2023, to 18 years and 8 months in prison for taking Gladys's life. Garcia pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, kidnapping, and domestic assault, according to the district attorney's office. He waived his credit for the just over 1,000 days he has spent in jail since his 2020 arrest. Retired Sheriff's Detective Joe Purcell handled the cold case investigation. "The fact is that we can give justice to people and to society. It is really important not to let these cases go unresolved. We need to have people pay the debt they owe to society," he said. Cheryl Monique Taylor lived in Weldon, North Carolina in 2002. She had married John Osby from high school, and they had one daughter named Justice who was 7 years old at the time. On August 16, 2002, she woke up and realized Cheryl hadn't woken her in time for school bus stop, so Justice missed it and went back into Cheryl's bedroom, only to discover someone had taken Cheryl's life. Autopsy results revealed Justice had been strangled and likely assaulted, though details about any signs of forced entry or any possible evidence belonging to her perpetrator have never been made public. Although authorities conducted extensive investigations, no arrests were ever made, and the case went cold. Grieving partners John and Justice continued grieving together for 17 more years after her passing. John Osby went missing in December 2019 and was later found shot and covered with a blanket near Sycamore Street in Weldon. Investigators were unable to track down who shot him, leaving his family with unanswered questions as to his whereabouts and the fate of Cheryl Taylor and John Osby. Sheriff Tyree Davis made a change when, in January 2023, he hired Detective Sergeant Samoji as Halifax County's dedicated cold case investigator. Detective Samoji began by studying John Osby's case before realizing Cheryl's life had been taken by someone years earlier. On July 21, 2023, 46-year-old Lewis Turner Jr. of Northampton County in North Carolina was arrested and charged with the voluntary manslaughter of Cheryl Taylor. It remains unknown as of yet whether or not Turner is also responsible for shooting John Osby. It has, however, come to light that Turner was known to Cheryl and her family in 2002 when he killed Cheryl, age 25 at the time he committed this act. It also has 2 criminal assault charges from when he was younger that resulted in probation being issued against him after his arrest. After being charged, he was held at Halifax County Jail under a $250,000 bond until further notice to appear before court hearing. Scott Hall, patrol captain for the Halifax County Sheriff's Office, explained why voluntary manslaughter charges had been leveled against this incident. "This was not premeditated or malicious killing based on facts of this case or elements of its crime, therefore we charged accordingly." Sheriff Tyree Davis expressed his emotions by sharing that arresting a suspect for Cheryl's case brought tears of joy. "I received the call that we were able to close one of our cold cases dating back over 20 years. No one knew, and until we informed her family, we couldn't say anything. When I found out the news, I was immediately overcome by emotion and tears began streaming down my cheeks. As a member of the State Commission, I sat front row alongside other board members, trying my best to keep myself together by wiping away tears as they came. Once my sniffles began surfacing, though, I knew I needed to leave. Folks, I can assure you that these tears were tears of joy and excitement, not only for M. Taylor's family, but also her friends, co-workers, schoolmates, and anyone she has crossed paths with before. Additionally, this beacon of hope serves as a beacon for other families that require closure as well. Justice Osby, Cheryl's daughter, expressed her sentiments upon hearing of Turner's arrest by saying it was an amazing feeling and she never expected it. Justice extended her gratitude to those involved with helping bring Turner to justice by saying, "Today is such a good day, thank you all." Laura Kempton was 23 years old in 1981 when she lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. She attended Portsmouth Beauty School while also working at Macro Polo Gift Store and Karen's Ice Cream Parlor. Laura was known as an outgoing free spirit with an outsized personality who enjoyed socializing. Laura was last seen entering her Chapel Street apartment alone during the early morning hours of September 28, 1981. A police officer serving a court summons for unpaid parking tickets found Laura's body hours later, upon making his way up to her residence and discovering a wooden panel piece had come loose from its hinge, creating an opening through which he could see Laura lying dead just inside her apartment. Autopsies showed that she died shortly after entering her apartment, suffering massive trauma to the left side of her head, including skull fractures, lacerations, and contusions on her brain. Additionally, she had been assaulted, which allowed DNA evidence collection from her body as well as evidence from the crime scene itself. Investigators collected other evidentiary items at this location. Interviews of other residents at Laura's apartment complex yielded no useful information, and the case ultimately fizzled out. In 1986, investigators revealed they had interrogated Ronald Spock about Laura's death after learning he had also killed 2 other women in Boston, Massachusetts. Spock denied any involvement. Portsmouth police, however, were monitoring his case closely and reviewing any criminal allegations made against him. Only Ronald Spiewak being from nearby NH gave a strong nudge in that direction. But this alone wasn't a strong link either. Spock had met his victims, Gina Quare and Kathleen McGuire, on 2 separate occasions in Boston and admitted later to ending their lives, though at first he claimed each time was self-defense based. Spock strangled both women before disposing of them in various locations, Gina in an abandoned railway car near South Boston, and Kathleen near an information booth on Interstate 95 near Kittery, Maine. No real links between Laura's case and that of Dina Kittler were ever discovered, but 2 Portsmouth detectives attending a conference in Florida at that time listened intently as an investigator from the Naval Investigative Service described its investigation into Dina Kittler. Dina was assaulted and strangled with rope at her Mayport, Florida home in December 1990, with signs of intense struggle being visible throughout her home, as well as numerous hair clumps which had been cut off in the bathtub. Her naval officer husband had been deployed at the time of Dina's death. Portsmouth Police, Captain James Tucker could hardly believe what he heard. Dina's case bore a striking resemblance to Michelle Leon's murder in New Hampshire, and authorities had already arrested someone named John Brewer as being involved with Dina's case. John Brewer had been released shortly after his arrest due to insufficient physical evidence. However, as more details emerged concerning Michelle Leon's case in Dublin, New Hampshire, Brewer was brought back into custody and held without charge. Soon, Portsmouth investigators were able to establish a link between Brewer and Michelle Leon. James Tucker found in records an application John Brewer had filled out listing Gary Leon as his reference. This led directly back to Michelle herself. Police identified John Brewer as being involved in both cases based on DNA evidence taken from hairs collected during the Kittler case and DNA sample collected for Leon case. Based on this discovery, Brewer was charged and brought before court for both. News of Brewer's indictment spread quickly across the Granite State, prompting reports that she had links to 3 additional cases, 2 in Portsmouth and 1 in Florida. At the time of Laura Kempton's murder, Brewer was living in New Hampshire, but his actions seemed distinct from those of New Hampshire natives. Unfortunately, no correlations could ever be drawn. Perhaps this was just an inference based on his arrest being performed by detectives from Portsmouth. Rumors in Portsmouth of what happened to Laura swirled about 2 young men known as drug suppliers. These individuals had appeared on police logs with various offenses before becoming more violent in nature. Thomas Faraghi led one such operation that escalated to far more brazen criminal activity. Faraghi had been arrested several times for assaulting women before being indicted in March 1982 for fatally shooting 24-year-old Valerie Blair of Rye at Odiorn State Park after she had been hit with 5 shots fired from a .22 caliber pistol. She had found her in Odiorn State Park with 5 bullet wounds to her head and face from Faraghi's operation. Thomas Faraghi remained in prison for years while maintaining his innocence of Valerie Blair's murder, attributing it to one of his associates whom he believes must have stolen his gun. Later in an interview, Faraghi suggested the same man may have killed Laura Kempton too. Faraghi claimed she was one of their customers, and one of their employees became upset after seeing Laura kiss someone while they were conducting business at her apartment, while they were there conducting transactions. In 1982, his girlfriend attended Portsmouth Beauty School together with Laura Kempton. Faraghi's DNA was collected, but never charged further than this incident. Instead, police looked into and cleared one suspect from Faraghi's accusations in both cases before moving on with their cases until far later cases against them was cleared as being responsible. On July 20, 2023, investigators finally released an important update. Laura's case had finally been solved after 42 years. Officials identified Ronnie James Lee as her perp. He resided and worked in Portsmouth. Rachel Harrington, Assistant Attorney General, stated there is no indication Lee knew Laura Kempton personally. Lee served in the U.S. Army from May 15, 1981 until May 15, 1982, before taking up employment at MBI Security at Liberty Mutual of Portsmouth from June 1981 through August 1982. Lee provided his mother's address on Rock Hill Avenue in Portsmouth when arrested by Portsmouth police for attempted theft on November 8, 1982. Lee was arrested and pleaded guilty to 4 residential and 1 commercial burglaries during 1983. 2 of these burglaries he pled guilty to in 1987. Additionally, Lee was convicted on assault charges stemming from a burglary committed in Keene, New Hampshire, that included assaulting a female resident in her own home during this incident. Lee was sentenced to prison from December 1987 until July 1990 and ultimately passed away after overdosing on February 9, 2005, at age 45. Attorney General officials stated that were Lee still alive, he would face first-degree charges of endangering Laura during an attempt at aggravated felonious assault and striking her with an object believed to be a wine bottle. Investigators used genetic genealogy techniques to identify Lee. Physical evidence at the scene in 1981 yielded male DNA profiles. Officials stated that starting in 2022, Portsmouth police have collaborated with the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory, Maine State Police, Forensic Laboratory, Attorney General's Cold Case Unit and Genetic Genealogy Research Organization, Identifiers International, collaborated in conducting forensic genetic genealogy to identify Lee as the donor of DNA found at the crime scene. Since he no longer lives, this case can now be considered closed and solved. Laura's family issued the following statement upon hearing of its resolution. We wish to extend our sincerest appreciation and thanks for solving Laura's case through Portsmouth Police Department. Their dedication and hard work, along with decades of personal commitment, has brought Laura to this point in time. Family would like to extend a sincere thank you to retired Captain John Parash and the Portsmouth Police Department Investigative Division team, members past and present, for all their hard work on Laura's case, which led to this important moment today. Their tireless dedication made this momentous event possible. Over the last 41 years, numerous other hands have touched Laura's file, and we express our profound thanks for all your contributions. At this time, however, the Kempton family requests privacy as we process this information. Thank you to all. Law enforcement officials have stated in the past that Laura's case and Tammy Little's death in Portsmouth in 1982 could possibly be linked. When asked by reporters about Tammy, Attorney General John Formella responded that it is still under investigation, while for Little he stated, "Our hope is that what we announce today may provide additional insight into that investigation." Tammy Little had not been heard from since Sunday evening, After friends dropped her off from a night out at Portsmouth Beauty School, friends had seen her arriving home after the event, after an overnight party on Saturday evening, and dropping her off in her Maplewood Avenue apartment after spending Saturday night out together. No one knew why Tammy would remain unreachable for so long. When something appeared wrong, it became evident. Tammy's mother decided to check in on her daughter at Maplewood Avenue apartment and discovered an unspeakably traumatizing sight: her lifeless body in their apartment, where they had been severely beaten on by someone. Authorities quickly responded when Tammy's mother called them about the case at 315 Maplewood Avenue. Investigators collected physical evidence from within her home, as well as interviewing nearby neighbors before conducting an autopsy the following day, which revealed she had died of massive head injuries caused by being viciously struck on the head with something. As Tammy's family and friends mourned her tragic death, many residents in her city found themselves living under an aura of unease. Many residents' worst fears had seemingly come true, and an air of uncertainty filled the neighborhood. Again it had happened. Another girl, another crime, and no arrests made. Laura and Tammy share much more in common than just how their lives ended. Tammy and Laura lived alone in ground-level apartments in Portsmouth and attended the Portsmouth Beauty School. Both women attended modeling agencies to try to secure work. Both women were outgoing, frequented some of the same bars downtown, and tragically both died on an autumn weekend day, only 1 mile apart from one another. DNA will soon provide answers as to whether Ronnie James Lee also played a part in taking Tammy Little's life.